welcome back to Life on the Wrist. Hope you are doing well today. As you can tell by my hat, we are going to be talking about MB&F today. This is a long overdue video. MB&F released a new watch called the Legacy Machine Sequential Evo. This was released, I want to say, maybe 2 weeks ago. And really, I spent the last 2 weeks sort of taking in what they've created because I think that this is an extremely revolutionary product from them. Like it's not something you can really be quick and react to so quickly without sort of understanding what it does for the world of watches, for MB&F as a brand, for Stephen McDonnell, who partnered with MB&F to produce this piece. So after sort of taking it all in, I recorded a podcast where we discussed this piece. And so feel free to go, if you have, wherever you listen to your podcast, you'll most likely find that Life on the Wrist podcast, where we spoke about this piece. And I think what I want to do in this video is continue to talk about this piece and give you an overview in case you didn't see our podcast. As with all of my videos, there will be a article on our website if you are interested in reading more about it. Maybe there'll be some more technical information there as well, if you want to see it there. So, like I mentioned, MB&F released the Legacy Machine Sequential Evo. This is the first chronograph that I should actually sort of back up a little bit. This was released on May 31st. And this is the 20th caliber that MB&F has released in just 17 years that it has been in existence. It's also the first ever chronograph which they released. If you know me, one of my favorite complications is the chronograph complication. So it was exciting for me to see my favorite watch brand and my favorite complication finally do something together. This was in collaboration with Stephen McDonnell. Stephen McDonnell has worked previously with MB&F on their perpetual calendar that they released, which is the LM Perpetual. And so this is I think this is the third time that he's worked with MB&F on one of their pieces. Essentially what the LM Sequential EVO movement incorporates is 2 column wheel chronographs and a groundbreaking Twinverter binary switch, allowing for multiple timing modes, which includes a split second and a lap timer mode, which is something that hasn't been seen before in the same watch, which is pretty incredible. When you look at this piece, you can really tell that it's part of their Evo line. If you don't know, the Evo line of watches at MB&F is sort of the everyday, or an attempt to make everyday watches. The idea is that you can bike, you can swim, you can do your normal activities that you would do when you're adventuring through life, and it would allow you to wear this watch while you're doing so. The way that they produced the LM, the Evo line, and it was first introduced with the LM Perpetual, is they basically have this ring that goes around the movement, which assists with shock absorption, and it was first put into the Perpetual calendar that they made, and now they've sort of released the sequential in that sort of product line. So to describe the watch a little bit for you, before we sort of get into the technical aspects and also sort of the timing, the different timing modes that you can do with this watch. So the watch itself is a 44 millimeter zirconium cased piece, part of their Evo line. It comes on a rubber strap. The watch features the time, which is fairly small in the grand scheme of the dial that you're going to be looking at, but there is a hours and minutes hand at 6 o'clock. You then have your 2 chronographs that work independently at kind of in the middle of the watch at sort of 3 and 9 o'clock, and then if you go up from those to 60-second counters for your chronograph, you'll get to your 30-minute counter. It's a manual wind movement ground up by Stephen McDonnell and MB&F, featuring 2 double mainspring. It has double mainspring barrels, so you're getting about 72 hours of power reserve. MB&F did do a release video where Stephen McDonnell did a really nice in-depth look at sort of all the information about this piece and how it how it was produced. He said that it was timed at 72 hours, but you could probably get more than that if you know, depending on use. So that sort of explains the dial. The dial is allows for you to see a lot of the components of the movement. It's almost like a base plate, and it comes in two different variations. You can get an orange dial with a black rubber strap, or I should not dial, orange base plate or a black base plate. Of course, what you're looking at is going to be, it's a Legacy machine, so what you will have as well is a balance wheel oscillating above this movement. And instead of having, what they've also kind of done is those balance, the sort of pieces of metal that was inspired by the Eiffel Tower, where the balance spring used to oscillate, they sort of have moved them back slightly, so it's a little bit more of like almost like a complete line that you're going to be looking at, as opposed to something that looks a little bit more like a wishbone. So you've got your two chronograph 60-second counters. You've got two 30-minute counters for each of those 60-second counters. You've got your time at 6 o'clock. When you turn the watch over, you've obviously got this incredibly beautiful, beautifully finished movement with a power reserve indicator on the back of the watch, and then you obviously can see your mainspring and a lot of other features that go into the chronograph. For example, you've actually got these oversized intermediate wheels, which essentially changes the which functions with the chronograph to convert the time. You also can see things like your vertical clutch. I think the intermediate wheel is really what stands out hugely with this piece. Massive intermediate wheels, which I think are really beautiful looking. So that's sort of the aesthetics of the piece. If we sort of dive into the chronograph, I guess the main feature of this watch, which is really the chronograph, Stephen McDonnell sort of was thinking through this idea, and he sort of discussed this on this release video with Max that they did on the 31st. And it was essentially like kind of thinking about the chronograph in a different way. I think something that Stephen expressed in sort of the Q&A section was the idea that a lot of the times the watch industry might not try and iterate on some of the things that they have produced, because what they've got is really, really great. But there are some things that took Stephen McDonnell back to the drawing board to sort of say, you know, how can we approach this differently and iterate off of the basic assumptions and principles of the chronograph construction to make it even better. A couple of things that he mentioned is, you know, when you have a chronograph complication, a lot of the times when you, when you start and stop a chronograph, there's friction at that point, and that messes with the amplitude of the watch, which messes with the accuracy of the timing. And so, you know, these little things that he noticed about the way that these are, you know, the way that these the traditional chronograph movement is produced were things that he wanted to iterate off of. So obviously you've got this chronograph, you've got this watch that has two chronographs that you can work, and like I mentioned, there are 4 ways that you can function this. So there is the independent mode, where you can measure the duration of multiple events with separate starting points and end points, even when the events overlap in timing. So you can start one chronograph on the right side, and if you look at the watch, you've got your chronograph pushers at 2 and at 5. And then you've also got on the other side of the watch, you've got your chronograph pushers on the opposite side, and then you have the Twinverter pusher, which is in between the 2 chronograph pushers on the left side of the case. So independent mode would mean starting one chronograph, starting the other chronograph, and they would run completely independently. You then have simultaneous mode, where you can measure the individual durations of 2 events that start simultaneously but have different endpoints. And so simultaneous mode, basically, it's a perfect example of it is when you can use simultaneous mode, for example, in a race involving 2 competitors that are starting at simultaneous times. The Twinverter allows you to start both chronographs at exactly the same time, but the different endpoints can be easily recorded by pressing each chronograph's stop-start button. So for this, you're going to start both chronographs by pushing that Twinverter, and then once the first racer crosses the line, you'll stop the one of the chronographs, and you'll stop the other one when the second person crosses the line. You then have Cumulative Mode, which measures the individual cumulative duration of two discontinuous events. So in Cumulative Mode, it occurs frequently in work environment, where you might want to know how much time you've spent on two separate projects as you switch between them throughout the day. So you can start one of the chronographs when you begin working on a task, and then you can use the Twinverter when you shift focus to the second task, and you can easily track the amount of time you cumulatively spend on each task. So another example would be kind of like a chess match. So you'll start the chronograph, one of the chronographs, you'll then hit that Twinverter, and it will basically do the mirror image. The other chronograph will do the mirror image. So you start your chronograph, hit the Twinverter, and you've got this chronograph running. What will end up happening is the opposite chronograph is going to start. The chronograph that was initially running will stop. And you can continue to do that as much as you want with the Twinverter function. And then the last mode that you can do is Sequential Mode, or lap mode, which basically measures the individual subduration of a single continuous multi-phase event with provision of subduration that lasts over a minute. So in Sequential Mode, it basically has its greatest relevance in competitive sports, where you can use it to measure individual lap times. So you basically starting one of the chronographs at the beginning of the event and using the Twinverter upon the completion of the lap, instantaneously launches the second chronograph in order to time the next lap, while the first chronograph is stopped, allowing ample time for the timing result to be noted. The stop chronograph can then be reset to 0, ready to be launched when with the Twinverter for the following lap. So essentially what you're doing is Sequential Mode. You start your lap, let's just use racing as an example. You start your chronograph. That lap is finished, so you want to record that lap, but you also want to time that second lap. So what you're doing is you'll hit the Twinverter, it'll stop this one, or I'll say this is stop and this is start. So it'll stop this one and it'll start the other chronograph. At that time, you can write down the lap time. What's really awesome is then you can actually reset the one that you have stopped while the second chronograph is still running, so that you're ready to basically track the next lap time when that second one starts. So 4 different modes that you can do, all of them relevant to the use of a chronograph, and an incredible just concept to have all of these. Like I mentioned, you don't have these complications, these different modes of using a chronograph in any other watch. So a huge accomplishment by Stephen McDonnell. Now, this is a huge feat. It's not something that's easy to produce, and so there's a lot of technical information that goes into the production of this watch. I think there's, there are 2 column wheel chronographs. You also have, in order to sync both of those up to be running off of the same Twinverter is a feat on its own, to get both of those functioning so that you can have something like a Twinverter. I think I'm not going to butcher the information. I'll put a link in the description of this video and on our website, so that you can read more about or hear Stephen McDonnell sort of talk about the struggles that he went through when producing this, because it is a very difficult feat. One of the things I did want to mention just quickly has to do with the vertical clutch. So as I mentioned, the clutch of a watch essentially like engages. The clutch is put onto a a rod basically, right? And you've got, and I think that is always continuously moving. And what ends up happening is when you start and stop, the clutch sort of engages with that wheel so that it can turn and basically keep track of the time. And that engaging and disengaging of that clutch is what leads to the amplitude changes, or the amplitude inaccuracies that happen in a normal chronograph. So in order to try and iterate off of that, what he ended up doing was taking a joule, which are typically used at friction points to actually do a better job of regulating that amplitude. But what he did is he took that joule and wanted to put it on that wheel shaft in order to reduce the impact of the amplitude, reduce the impact on amplitude. The problem with it is it's a shaft, right? So it's typically you can sort of just press a joule into the metal. But unfortunately that's not possible with this because you have a shaft. So what he ended up doing was machining this piece that sort of went around the shaft and allowed for the joule to be placed in a circular shape around the watch. To do that, it was very difficult. He actually referenced quite an old an existing practice where you basically bend a little bit of metal to keep the joule in place, and he basically affixed those to the shafts of the chronograph. And what's incredible is it actually reduced the impact on amplitude on the watch. And I think like just conceptually when you think about that, you're like, well, now we've Stephen McDonnell has figured out a way to produce something that is almost like the perfect chronograph movement, which is it's mind-blowing, which is why I think it took me so long to sort of conceptualize and figure out how I wanted to cover it. There's so much that goes into this, like Twinverter levers that he had to come up with, which allows for both chronographs to interact with one another but operate separately. The technical aspects of this, I hope to go a little bit more in depth on this in the article that I write for the website, so be sure to stay tuned for that. But a huge accomplishment for MB&F. MB&F, congratulations. I've sent you a message already, but a huge congratulations on this piece. It's incredible the amount of calibers you've come out with. I'm so excited that you've come out with a chronograph. It puts a smile on my face every single day. They mentioned that there's going to be about 35 produced in the next year. MB&F produces a limited amount of watches, and I guarantee there's going to be more than 35 people who want to get their hands on one of these. So congratulations to those who got them. I'm so happy for you, MB&F. Really phenomenal for you guys, and I'm so excited to see what else you release coming up. Check out our article on our website so you can see some more information from us. I'll put a link in the article and in this video in the description of the link to the MB&F website. I'll put a link to their release video where Stephen McDonnell talks about this, and then Max does a really nice job as well in kind of discussing this piece. It really is an incredible feat. So yeah, congratulations, MB&F. Check out all the links so you can see it. I think I'm gonna make it a tradition to wear my MB&F hat when I talk about their new releases. I'll see, I don't know, but yeah, we'll have to see. If you are new to Life on the Wrist and you like these videos, be sure to subscribe to the channel and share this with someone who you know who might like watches. Love to have them part of the Life on the Wrist family. Let us know in the comment section below what you think about the LM Sequential EVO. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button for us, it would help us out with the YouTube analytics. With that said, guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and until next time.